Hi, Danielle.
Hi guys, how are you?
Good. How about you?
I'm good. I'm in Tennessee, so it's warm and sunny, but good weather so far.
Nice.
Nice. What part of Tennessee?
So we are 5 minutes from Pigeon Forge and 10 minutes from Gatlinburg, so right there in the middle.
Nice.
We're going to wait
Enjoy.
maybe another minute to let people in, but then we'll get started.
Okay.
I'm really jealous that you're here. Well, it's beautiful now. The clouds are gone in Northeast Ohio.
Yeah, when we came in yesterday, it was really it was pleasant. It was so pleasant down here. And I'm really this entire week it's supposed to be nice, so I cannot complain about the weather. But
Good.
we're in the mountains, so I was hoping maybe some of the trees had started to turn, but not quite yet. It's still pretty green up here.
It's just right in that cusp.
Yeah, we were driving down and I could see some trees are starting to turn, but in the Great Smoky Mountains, we're still a little early, I think.
Oh, it's still beautiful scenery
Yes,
nonetheless.
yes, absolutely.
Tammy, I'm a little surprised you didn't take the day off, given that your team's playing tonight.
I wore brown, even though they're wearing the white today. I found it very hard to concentrate today. And especially because last week, I was in Boston while they were playing, and my nephew would not let us stop on the itinerary. So it was very hard. I had to catch glimpses. And we left my husband somewhere watching the games.
They look good so far, though.
I'm excited, you can't always win either. So, but
Yeah,
hoping.
rooting for you tonight, though.
Thank you. And we're playing the Steelers. So
I
I know. Yeah.
know. I've seen a lot of memes that are like, "This is the time to root for the Browns. They're undefeated."
oh yeah.
You know?
Us diehard Browns fans really take a beating with the memes, let me tell
Yes,
you.
yes.
Okay, well, I think we'll get started. My name's Mark Weicker. For everyone who's on, welcome to the Special Education Legal Clinic. The name of our firm, which has changed recently, is Abdenor Weicker, LLP. And the Special Education Legal Clinic is a collaboration between AW, DRO, and OCECD, which is Abdenauer Weicker, Disability Rights Ohio, and the Ohio Coalition for the Education of Children with Disabilities. And the Special Education Legal Clinic, the goal is to provide special education information for parents, guardians, and educators. I think we've done a good job at that so far. It consists of a monthly workshop and then individual guidance sessions, which are held immediately after the workshop for those who register in advance. Today's workshop is led by Amy Freeman and Tammy Sebastian from OCECD, and the title is Transition Planning and Section 5 of the IEP. And this is the first workshop in a series, a post-secondary transition series, which includes 8 total monthly workshops and which runs through April of 2024. And we've been working on this series for a while. We're excited about it. And the content of today's workshop, I think, will be great. Once we get started, we'll provide a link to a handout that Tammy's provided to us and an evaluation that we'll have you fill out for today's workshop. One additional point is that closed captioning is available. At the bottom, if you move your cursor, you should be able to click on the CC button or the Show Captions button if you need them individually, and the captions should appear throughout the course of the workshop. And as most of you know, if you're attending today, you've registered for the workshop through www.lawyersforstudents.com/legal clinic. I'll put that in the chat box. Let me make sure that goes to everyone. And that's where you can sign up for any of the other workshops or for individual guidance sessions if you're so inclined. And that's all I have. And I'm going to turn it over to Tammy and Amy.
Thank you, Mark. Like Mark said, we are excited to be here today and talking about a topic that we love dearly and that we've all decided was very important in the state of Ohio. So we have this entire series this year is going to be on transition. And we're going to be hitting different points in that. Today, we're going to be talking about and trying to make it as fun as possible. We're going to talk about the components in section 5 on transition. So with that being said, I'm going to do a brief introduction. My name's Tammy Sebastian. I am the statewide program coordinator for the Ohio Coalition for the Education of Children with Disabilities. And I am also a parent of 2 young adult individuals with disabilities. That's what brought me to the work. So I have been through the transition process and still going through the transition process because it is lifelong. And so with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Amy so she can do a brief introduction. Then we'll come back and talk a little bit about the Ohio Coalition briefly.
Hi, I'm Amy Freeman, and I'm the Coalition's statewide transition programs coordinator. And that means post-secondary programs, but it also means birth to 2 all the way up through elementary school. Anytime a family and children are facing transitions, we try to make sure that we provide resources that are helpful to families. I have twins that were both involved in the early end of transition programming, as well as I had a brother who had Down syndrome. So go ahead, Tammy.
Thank you. So just a brief introduction, and go ahead and throw in the chat box if you have heard of the Ohio Coalition. Yes, no, just kind of wanted to get everybody's feeling. I'm just going to give you a brief introduction, but we are a statewide nonprofit organization, and we serve, like Amy said, families of infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities in Ohio, and also the professionals that serve them. We've been funded since 1984 as the Parent Training Information Center, or also we call it the PTI. So under whose idea, every state has to have a PTI, a Parent Training Information Center. We are that for the state of Ohio. We help parents become informed, effective representatives for their children. We do that through giving them knowledge about their laws, resources, rights, and responsibilities. And everything that we do is at no cost to parents.
And I think it's also important, and we'll mention this later, because we are the Ohio's PTI, we are reliant upon funding. And in order for us to continue the funding, we really need to get evaluations from services that we provide, including training such as what Tammy and I are providing this afternoon. So towards the end of our presentation, we'll ask you to make sure you complete the evaluation because that continues the work that we're doing. So thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Amy. I'll repeat that again at the end. So thank you very much. So before we get started, just give you a little bit of background, but post-secondary transition, what we're going to be talking about today is building the future. And that's what transition is about. The training is really based on the premise that we agree the basics of why students with disabilities have that fundamental right to education, just like all students. And really that opportunity to plan and secure a future is the right of all students. And we need to be specific and look at that through the transition process and look at what those hopes, dreams, and kind of looking at that and building around that, as we'll be talking about building the future. And we really need to support those dreams. And we do that by helping them lay a foundation to achieve their goals. So we're going to do a little play on building the future and the foundation, as you can see there. So I just wanted to give you a little brief intro. And let's start taking a look at the transition process and what your role is in the transition process as it evolves. Amy?
Tammy, I'm just going to jump in real quick. And
Yep.
For some reason, and we may have chat disabled for some reason. I'm not sure why,
Oh,
but it's
okay.
easy enough. I think we can send chats as the panelist. But if anyone, if we invite you to, provide your positions like Amy has, or anything else, you can use the Q&A in the same way. So if you have comments or questions or want to drop your roles in the Q&A, you can do it that way.
Perfect. And too, if there's questions that you know, as they come in, if you want to stop us, I know we have a lot of content to cover in a short amount of time, but we'll try to get to those questions the best we can. So thank you, Mark, for saying that.
Thanks, Mark. Well, secondary transition, it's a coordinated set of activities for a child with a disability that is designed to be used within a results-oriented process. So the focus is on improving the academic and functional achievement of the child to facilitate the child's movement from school to post-secondary activities. And we will talk a lot today about, it's referred to as PINS, preferences, interests, needs, and strengths. So a lot of the focus of building the transition IEP is based on the child's needs, strengths, interests, and preferences. As I mentioned, it is results oriented, and we always start with the student. No planning for transition or for any other IEP process should be done without the student at the forefront. So just to make sure that whenever you're thinking of transition planning, that it's all about the student and it's all about the student's future and what the student is interested in. So that's where the data collection comes into play. And the data collection is done both in formal and in informal assessments. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But we really want to focus on the student and the outcomes of this that the student wants to see take place, and that we come up with a plan with the student and we expect results.
I love that, Amy. Definitely, we need to expect those results. And if we do that, we will do good in that transition process. So when we talk about that in the process, we need to talk about, and like Amy said, the student should be at the forefront, but who should be involved and why should the student attend their transition meeting? So we really want to talk about, and Amy really does a lot of work on this as her role as the statewide transition programs coordinator, but we really have to talk about developing self-determination and sharing personal disability information and how to ask for help. Also, that we really want to get the student to understand that this is about them, that they have choices to make. We want them to be problem solvers. We want them to be resilient. We also want to make sure that parents and guardians, that they have the information to support the student. Obviously, the school district should be involved. And I cannot say enough about making sure that we have those community agencies at the table, especially early on in the beginning of the transition process. It doesn't mean, you know, we don't have to wait until it's time to start doing assessments, really to make sure we have all those people to wrap around that student. And a lot of times we get asked with students, when should we bring the student in? And do we wait until they're at post-secondary transition age? And Amy and I, we've talked about this a lot, bring them in as soon as possible, sometimes just to do introductions. So they're familiar with the process and we're just not throwing them in and telling them, hey, now it's time to be a self-advocate. And you know, you are now at post-secondary transition age. And we actually have the opportunity, and I'll, you know, stop at this. We had the opportunity to hear from a lot of youth that we went to a national conference, and it was, they became huge youth advocates. And they were speaking on the transition process, and they talked about the fact that many of them never even knew what the word transition meant. And so that was alarming to Amy and I, that we really want to make sure that they understand what that means, and more than just involvement, that they understand, and that their involvement is paramount to the success of the plan. So, like I just said, we talk about transition and starting at age 14 years. And one of the things I always say, and when we talk about parents' rights and the law, is when IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is federal law. However, we can always, as a state, do more than and go above and beyond that, but you can never do less than. And so we're very lucky in the state of Ohio that transition starts at the age 14 years. I can tell you 16 is just not enough time because 18 is right around the corner. So we really want to make sure that beginning not later than the first IEP to be in effect when the child is 14, and then also making sure that it's updated annually thereafter. There has to be appropriate, measurable post-secondary goals that are based upon age-appropriate transition assessments that are related to training, education, and independent living skills. They all have to tie together. They all have to be measurable and purposeful and all build into each other. And then also, not only that, but appropriate measurable post-secondary goals that are also based on those age-appropriate transition assessments. And if you are a professional, they're called AATAs. If you're a parent, learn that the AATAs are age-appropriate transition assessments related to employment in a competitive environment in which workers are integrated regardless of disability. So competitive means that they are paid at the same rate of their peers. And then also that the transition services include courses of study that are needed to assist the child in reaching those goals. And then in order to have the required information, districts will need to begin that process prior to the child's 14th birthday. Many students will turn 14 during the school year. So those students' IEPs will need to be in compliance with the secondary transition requirements, which will require districts to begin the process when the child is 13 years of age or younger. So I'm sorry I was long-winded with that, but there's a lot of information in there.
So now we're talking about IEP Section 5, the post-secondary transition, and the three components. And this was as of the most current revised IEP form from 2018. Post-secondary training and education is the first, competitive integrated employment is the second, and lastly is independent living. And I do want to mention that the Office for Exceptional Children through the Ohio Department of Ed is in the process of updating their IEP form. So we are excited to see how it's going to look, and it's always a few steps that they have to go through, hoops to jump through before it becomes official. But it all starts with, as Tammy mentioned, the age-appropriate transition assessment, so AATA. And so the assessments are all related to these three goal areas. And then from the assessments, we develop the goals for each of these categories. And so every child 14 and older is assessed in each of these three goal areas. Based on that information and assessment, we develop the goals. And what's important is that the team needs to summarize. There we go. Okay.
I apologize.
That's okay. Needs to summarize the assessment information. What type of assessment was it? Was it paper pencil test, an apprenticeship, member of a small group that was taught specific skills or tasks, an assistive technology assessment? And you need to include the person or agency responsible for conducting the assessment so that the summary of results are included as part of the IEP process.
Thank you, Amy. And I think it's important to let everybody know those transition assessments really tell us a lot of information of, what those skills are, what careers might look like for them. So there's a lot of different information that comes from those age-appropriate transition assessments.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. So courses of study, where are we going? So we're talking about building a building, right? We need to know Where are we going? So we have to list the type of courses in which the child receives instruction during the school year. So course of study requirements will be documented in section 5 of the IEP for each of the measurable post-secondary goals. Remember, I told you everything ties in. Find out what the student wants to do with their life and what course of study best fits the student. And that's really all that is saying. Is this still my slide? Yeah. So it, again, must have a direct relationship to the post-sec. I know we're going to keep pounding on that, but there's a reason. It all has to tie in together. And I always say transition really drives the IEP. Transition drives everything. Transition is what's getting us to the next stage. So find out what the student wants to do with their life, what course of study best fits them, or what other courses are needed. The student's goals for high school or life after high school may include, it could look like a college, a university, it could be military, a junior college, you know, they call them junior colleges or community colleges, internships, apprenticeships, on-the-job training, adult education, vocational training. So if the student wants to go to college, then what are those college prep classes in high school that should be considered? And if the student wants to go to the vocational school, his or her junior year, there are certain classes that they might have to take for that as well. Or what can we do to prepare them to go to those vocational programs?
For the transition assessment, the data that is developed or that is determined from the assessment really serves as the common thread in the transition process and forms the basis for defining the goals and services to be included in the IEP, specifically around transition. So in order to develop the IEP goals and objectives for transition, this helps us with the good transition information to make instructional programming decisions and to include this information in the present levels of performance or the profile section of the IEP, specifically related to the student's interests. So these are things we want to make sure the student contributes his or her, feelings about, what do I want to do in life? Where do I want to work? Where do I want to live? What are my strengths and what are my needs? And what is my current functioning level? What do I need to address for the barriers going into my future? So, and I'm going to reference Charting the Life course because the Ohio Coalition has just recently become, some of us, Tanvi and myself included, are life course ambassadors. And if you're not familiar with Charting the Life course, if I'm able to put a comment in the question and answer section, I will. I wasn't able to just a minute or two ago, but I'll give you a link so that you can read about Charting the Life course, because it's really listening to what the student wants to do. What is their dream? What does their good life look like? So all the questions that come show up here on this slide really deal with what does my good life look like?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. And there's a lot of great tools they can go onto the website and look at, parents, professionals alike, to help those conversations and what that might look like. And some of these questions here can, help facilitate that process with those tools as well.
Amy, we did have a question in the chat.
I can't see it, so
I'm going to read it to you. As a parent, and this is from Ronnie, as a parent, how would I know / identify the AATA assessment for my student? Is there a list?
on which one's being used? Is that, or just if they're being done at all? I don't know if we can expand on that.
Maybe we'll get some more. Maybe.
Yeah, if you could tell me just a little bit more about what you're saying. So like if you're, I mean, that should be identified within the transition, within the IEP meetings. There should be discussion around them. You should know they're happening. If that's what you're asking. As far as what's being used, I mean, that really needs to also be talked about and discussed within the meeting. So I don't know if it was a generalized answer. I'm sorry, but if you want to be more specific, just give me a little bit more information. I hope that helps.
Thank you. I know we're digressing just a minute, but Mark just put in the chat. It's a link to the coalition's website for, we call it the youth portal, but there's so many resources available on post-secondary transition, from a youth interviewing many other youth about self-determination, self-advocacy, to resources that are very helpful to IEP teams, as well as to families and youth. So the link is in the chat. So please take a minute at some point and review what's available. Thanks.
So I don't know if you mentioned, Amy, I just wanted to be clear, there's formal and informal age appropriate transition assessments. So there's many ways to collect that data. I'm not sure if that's what Ronnie was asking, but again, these should be conversations and you should understand what's taking place and they should be being explained to you.
And
I hope
Tammy,
that helps.
yeah,
We
Ronnie
also
did provide just some clarity. It said, yes, Ronnie was looking for the types being used and explored.
Yeah, so there's many. There's aptitude tests, interest and work value inventories, intelligence tests, career maturity, readiness tests, self-determination. The list goes on and on and on. And that's why I'm saying it just really, that's why they're called age appropriate transition assessments. They really have to be discussed. I mean, informal assessments would be like interviews with the parent, with the student, with teachers, direct observations. So there's many that they can use to inform those. I hope that helps.
Well, and there was another question asking for transition assessments that can be used with students with significant physical and intellectual disabilities who may be nonverbal.
Yeah, so again, that would be a conversation to have. Again, there is a plethora of assessments to use, and I would definitely talk to the team about that, especially if you're looking at a nonverbal assessment to be used. So again, talk to the team about that. I can't name one specific one if that's what's being asked, but definitely have that discussion with the team and make sure that they're utilizing them. I mean, there's intelligence tests that I can tell you, like the C-Tony, but we're talking about that might be one thing that they're using to inform the transition assessments. But what we're talking about is if that's what they're using as far as intelligence tests, I can tell you the test of nonverbal intelligence. But anything besides that, I can't be more specific. I'm sorry. But
And
that
Mark,
is something you should ask. Go ahead, Amy.
Mark just put in the chat. It's through OCALI and it's their age appropriate transition assessment. It's a planning guide. So that's great resource.
Could open up, yes. They have so much. Thank you for doing that, Mark. Amy is right. OCALI has so many resources. They also have a library you can check out. I'm not sure if there's some in there, but they actually have that whole, right? They have a whole thing built into their website on age appropriate transition assessments.
It's a planning guide.
Yeah. So if we, I mean, we could probably take up a whole other hour just talking about age appropriate transition assessments, but yes, those are the good resources. Are we good?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. All right. So, when we talk about, again, we're going to make the plan to come together. We're going to start building that future, and we really want to look at that future planning and those profile sections of the IEP. We have so much great information in there. So information that's related to adult living, working, learning. We really want to make sure that we're including those. Also the statement of transition services needed, this IEP section 5, what we're talking about today, we should have the course of study, the student's course of study, advanced placements, voc ed, vocational education, career tech. All those should be, again, I keep talking about making sure that they relate and they tie in. It's very important. It's just like the wheels or the spokes in a wheel. If you don't have all the spokes in the wheel, it's not going to turn. and we really want to make sure that we're, you know, we're making sure we're connecting all that. So it may be that the student needs a specific course to pursue a specific vocation. So the example is mathematics or courses including measurement for carpentry. So again, the IEP team needs to make sure any age appropriate transition assessment information is also included in there as well. So that's what really needs to be in there. And again, future planning, that's what you can take. Again, Amy talked about charting the life course, and we're talking about what you see, and one of the biggest things that we've found is a lot of times when you ask families, or, you know, when you ask yourself as a parent or a student what you want, it's really hard to think about that. But when you ask about the things that you don't want, sometimes you know those right off the bat. And that might be a good way to start the conversation and put those things in future planning. I know future planning for me was always the scariest thing to fill out. That was always like the of the whole thing. So, and I always tell families, it doesn't have to be for the entire time. Every year you are coming to this IEP meeting, and you could just make short-term future planning goals. So is this you now, Amy?
It is, thank you. So building the future with these post-secondary goals. So each of the areas in the section 5 of the IEP team will enter a goal or goals that may be completed after the child graduates from high school. So it's important to note that the goals will be addressed after the child graduates. So the school district does not have responsibility, but the responsibility the district and the school has is to ensure that the student has the resources, has had the exposure, the skills needed to be able to attain those post-secondary goals.
So we're looking at employment goals here. Do we want full or part-time? These are really important questions. Independent or supported employment, you know, and what does that look like? Volunteer opportunities. That is something that we talk about all the time. I don't know if we utilize it enough. Just because and we all want to get paid, but those volunteer opportunities, and I've told my own children this, those are very important because you can learn experience from those. And they can make you a well-rounded person. So don't leave out those volunteer opportunities. Also, career exploration to determine what interests the student has, what careers they might want to explore. Job shadowing is another good way to explore those careers of interest. Sometimes local agencies, and again, building the community in. We're always talking about those multi-tiered systems of support, and building those in, and bringing those community people in, and the community jobs in is a good way to build those collaborations. It's never hard, you know, doesn't hurt anybody to maybe reach out to a place of employment and see about a student doing a job shadowing experience with them. So these are just some of the ways, but also vocational assessments can evaluate the work or the related skills the child has. And this will also help in matching the skills the child has to an appropriate job to consider. So, but we always want to make sure that we are keeping the focus on the child's interests.
Great,
and these are,
you.
oh, go ahead.
No, you're good.
So some examples of employment goals. These are measurable because we know exactly what the student will be doing and by when. After graduation, remember, if you can see it or count it, it's measurable. So here are some examples we have of goals. After graduation, Sue, will have a job working as a cosmetologist. I'm not going to read them all to you, but you see where we're going with that.
So as with the employment goals, there's also education goals. So each IEP team will need to address education as well. And so the questions to the youth are need to include, do I want to pursue education after high school? And if I do, does that look like a 2-year program, as Tammy mentioned earlier, or a 4-year, a technical training, on-the-job training, military? So those are the types of programs that would further the youth's education. But you also need to think about what are the entrance requirements in order to be able to do a college or a technical training. Have they met them? Are they on the right track to completing those requirements? Are they taking the appropriate courses in high school to prepare them for college? And the IEP team can also look at how can they assist the youth in securing funding for college, scholarships, grants. What's the application process look like, and how can they help the student become prepared if they are pursuing these education goals? And do they know what kinds of accommodations are rights for them as they pursue education goals? And that would include additional time on an SAT or ACT. So making sure that the youth is well informed of what rights are available. And to also make sure the youth understands when they graduate from high school, the IEP ceases to exist. And if they go to college, then that's where the 504 comes into play. And youth need to make sure they understand the 504 Act to know what is available to them, what rights are part of what should be their educational experience. So it's important that we make sure the youth are educated.
And believe me, I know you got another side, but believe me that what she's saying is so true. It's a lot to take, but they have to be empowered to utilize their accommodations. And one other thing, Amy, I just wanted to mention really quick. I know we got a lot of slides to cover, but I just want to mention, I feel it's very important, is that one of the things, not only, what do they have to do to prepare, but I always talk about what do we have to do to make sure that they're not going to go into remedial classes if they're entering into a college program. So just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, good point. Did have a question. There's a lot of overlap between Section 5 of the IEP and the student's IPE, Individualized Plan for Employment, with OOD. Should IPE goals be referenced in Section 5?
Oh, that's a great question.
It is a great question.
So
of course.
yeah, because they're working towards that.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a really, I don't know who asked that, but that was a really good question. They absolutely should.
Thanks, Dana. That's a great question.
Yeah. Yes is the answer.
Yes. So these are additional education goals: attending vocational school, technical school, vocational tasks to assist with transition to an adult day program. And you can go on. That we just wanted you to know what some education goals could look like.
Perfect. So I have the next, I think, 5 slides. So I will be talking to you guys for a little while, but these are very fast. So independent living goals, what does that look like? We're talking about budgeting, money and finances, and that's number 1. That bullet's up there for a reason. Number 1, that's huge. All children need that. Budgeting, money, finances, what that looks like, communication skills. What am I going to need and able to communicate my needs? Transportation, what is that going to look like? Am I going to drive? Am I going to take a bus? Am I going to need somebody to take me? Health related issues, medical issues, who's going to handle all those things? And obviously self-advocacy skills. Actually, that should be at top, then budgeting. But self-advocacy skills, that is, we all need that to get through life. And so here is an example. Upon completion of high school, Sue will have the skills needed to manage her finances, to be self-employed, to manage tips and healthcare needs, being very specific about what that looks like. And then another one is Tom needs to increase his this is on self-advocacy skills. Tom needs to increase his self-advocacy skills by becoming more aware of his disability and by finding out what services and supports are available prior to attending the technical center. And again, having these conversations, talk about those things. What is that going to look like for Tom? And again, how do we make him become more aware of his disability? Will he be disclosing it? You know, all those conversations. And then upon completion of high school, Ryan will learn with help from direct care staff how to access a variety of vocational and social, recreational, too many O's, exposures such as material handling, computer, exercise therapy classes, as well as leisure time. And then you're up, Amy.
We did have a question. It says, I've frequently seen transition goals such as Dakota will become a professional wrestler. In order to become a professional wrestler, Dakota will attend school every day and turn in his homework. In this case, Dakota has never wrestled. When I push back on this being an unrealistic goal, the answer is always it's based on the student's interests. I'd appreciate your thoughts.
Oh, well, I am going to tell you, I think we talk about what wrestling is and what wrestling means. What is the name she used? Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't want to. I'm sure she used a fake name.
Dakota.
Dakota. Okay. So, you know, so I don't know who's speaking, whether it's realistic or it's realistic to Dakota. Okay. So having those conversations about what that really is going to look like. Does he really want to have a career in wrestling? And then I think you talk about maybe, for example, I know that there are many kids who like video games or here, I'll use an example. Let me give you an example. I knew someone who really wanted to be a police officer, and there was conversation on whether or not that was a realistic goal. And when we got down to the conversation about what it was that he seen as being a police officer, it wasn't actually going, carrying a gun, pulling people over. He wanted to be able to be in that environment. He wanted to wear the uniform. He wanted to feel like he could have a purpose and serving people. And so it really was a realistic goal. And there was a program where they were able, and it's thinking outside of the box, where they were able to get him in a program where he is security, doesn't carry a gun, but works at some of the different hospitals. He also does a lot of the like carnivals around. And so it's about having those conversations and going a little bit deeper. It might not just be about being a professional wrestler, but if you talk to any student, you know, in the beginning, I mean, we've heard kids in 15 years old, I aspire to be a rapper. I aspire, who's to say that that's not realistic? But I think it's about having the conversations about, oh, do you enjoy music? I hope you guys are getting where I'm going with that. I hope that's helpful, but that's my opinion, is having deeper conversations and not just leaving it at that, you know, oh, he wants to be a wrestler. Okay, we're going to make him a wrestler. I think we need to have conversations around it. Amy, I don't know. Do you want to?
No, that's helpful. I think that was good.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Now I lost. Where are we?
Okay. We're talking about the transition services and
you were there. Okay.
Yeah,
yes.
what the action plan looks like. Now that we've gathered all of this assessment information and we've identified what goals for each of the three areas, we need to put into place what does that look like as far as the strategies and the action plan. So these are the services or activities that need to happen in order for the child to achieve their post-secondary goals. Sometimes the activities or services overlap, and that's okay. And it may be that some of the providers for these services and strategies are not the school. They're outside of the school. It could be the family, the youth, A
I think
community-
that just hit the question that was just asked too, Amy.
Yes, yeah. Other folks can be the service provider. It doesn't always have to just be the school. So I think that's important to remember. And so here are some examples of transition services, activities. I mean, they're called different things, action plans, like contacting the local college for the disability documentation policy. And to me, that goes along with it. The youth has to be able to describe what is their disability, what do they know about, what their challenges are, what do they do well, but also what are their challenges. So that's important. And I think sometimes we dismiss youth from being empowered with that information about themselves so that they can really be their best self-advocate. And it's, let's see, just important that we include related services whenever we're talking in action plan items, because they may need related services after high school.
And how to access them. That's huge. Yeah.
Those.
I think this is your last one, Amy. Oh no, you got two more.
I got two more. So these things that would be helpful for the student, how to vote, things that we shouldn't ever take for granted, how to register for a selective service if you're a male, visit places in the community to shop. So these are all action plan items. And then the next slide talks about speaking up at different events, like while job shadowing, learning the self-advocacy skills, like if you're going to a doctor's appointment, to make sure that you ask questions that are pertinent to what your current situation is, what your medical situation is, and to always ask that the youth can always ask for help if they need help with things. And then if they need financial aid, how to ask for those resources and to make sure that it's included in the work that the IEP team does.
I agree. Thanks, Amy. Well, and then we talk about who is responsible. So although a parent and others may support the child in preparing for post-secondary life, it's the school district's responsibility to see that the child is prepared. I'm just going to say that is their responsibility to make sure that they are prepared. And that's really in pursuing their post-secondary goals that's written in the IEP. It does not mean that the school district is responsible for the child achieving those goals. So I'm very clear about that. They're responsible for preparation. And that the child is equipped to pursue those post-secondary goals when they graduate. This is you, then. Yep.
Yes. And we've talked about it a bit. What we really want you to know is anytime you can empower youth to be their own advocate, it's going to be life-changing for them, as during high school from 14, actually well before 14 if they're learning self-advocacy skills, but well beyond high school, once you can work with youth on learning their own voice and using that voice. So they need to know what their strengths are and what their interests are, and to know what is their disability and how to explain that and how to ask for help. And again, back to the coalition's website on youth, it's the youth portal. There's so many resources that can be beneficial to the youth about learning their voice and how to make good decisions. And what we know is sometimes youth are discouraged from making their own decisions. So, and that leads into the next slide about the transfer of rights. What is the age of majority? Age of majority in Ohio is 18. Required discussion when the child turns 17 about the transfer of rights. So no, the transfer of rights starts at 18. And I know that what we're learning from the Ohio Department of Ed, I mentioned that they are in the process of updating their IEP. They want to have resources for families. What does it mean when my child turns 18? So that it's not just assumed that guardianship is going to be pursued for the child because it may be very inappropriate, but because educators and parents and well-meaning individuals think, oh, a child's turning 18, they're going to get taken advantage of if they don't get a guardian. That may not be what needs to happen. So we're hoping through the new work with the Office for Exceptional Children and the IEP process that there'll be great resources available for the youth, and understanding what the age of majority means and what the transfer of rights means. So we've had a couple more questions in the
Can I
chat.
just say something before
Yes.
that too? I just think
Yes.
it's important to say too, it might be guardianship is needed, but it involves the individual that is being discussed, where it's not just like Amy said, that it's assumed that they are actually involved in making that decision, whether or not guardianship is needed or not. I just wanted to say that. Okay.
Thank you.
And we can we only do like could we hold those questions for a minute so we can get through the
But I do want to give a plug for one of the series one of the next sessions, is not next session, but one of the trainings that is being provided through the same platform is on February 20th at noon. It's the transfer of rights and guardianship that is being presented by an attorney and a key figure at the Office for Exceptional Children. So if you don't have it on your calendar and you want more information, please make sure that you sign up for February 20th at noon, transfer of rights, guardianship, etc. So go ahead, Tammy.
I just wanted to say, I do want to get to the questions. We only have a couple more slides, and then I promise you we'll get to the questions. But I just think this is important. I wanted to say what Amy just said. This whole series, you'll be hearing even more. And I think this was great that we started off with this. We'll be talking more in depth in some of these sections that we've talked about today. And one of those things too is part of the transition process is the summary performance. If you are a parent and you went through the transition process, you might be like, what is that? We've had a lot of discussions on whether or not the summary performance is done or not. So this document is it's not usually recognized by colleges and universities of giving them the summary performance and saying, I have a disability. It's really, and it just depends on what college and universities you're going to and what they need as far as documented disability, but it may be used to help a college or employer understand the goals that the student had for life after graduation and what accommodations and supports are really needed in order for that student to be successful. So for a child whose eligibility terminates under circumstances, basically it's the summary of academic achievement and functional performance. It really is I was going to give you like the legal thing, and I kind of stopped myself. I'm sorry. I went one slide up. It really needs to be how to assist the child in meeting those goals. I kind of think the summary of performance kind of looks like, this is all that's been accomplished. This is what they need in order to move on. And so that's probably the shortest way I can describe it. And then Amy, am I doing backwards planning too? I'm 29 also. Yes. So when we talk about backwards planning, just like building a home, and we talked about that in the beginning, the IEP transition team is building a child's future. Remember, we talked about that in the beginning. So no one would ever think of building a house without an idea of the finished product. We'd want to know what it's going to look like, right? So why would we do that with a child's future? Why would that look any different? So no one would think about, let's build a house without having the blueprints and a plan in place. So the IEP team, the IEP transition team needs to have a well thought out and transition, a well thought out, appropriate transition plan in place for children with disabilities. So, and then we also would not think about building a home if we didn't have all the right people that we needed in place. You need carpenters, you need bricklayers, you need electricians. All these people are necessary in order to achieve the results. So the same is true with the transition team. So that's really basically what we are saying when we're talking about backwards planning, having that future in mind. What does that look like? And so I think, Amy, was this you?
Yes, and based on what Tammy just addressed with backwards planning, building is complete. The transition team is building the child's future. So we've laid the framework. The child is going to be prepared because of all of the pieces that we've addressed to be included in the work while they're still in school. But we have more that we want to share in the last few minutes. But before we get to the final pieces, we want to ask you to go ahead and click on the link for the evaluation. And Tammy and I can answer questions while you're completing the evaluation.
I was just going to suggest that, Amy.
Okay. And then we can finish up with the resources that we want to share with you after we answer the questions and you complete the evaluation. Okay.
Okay. So go ahead and complete those evaluations. And Amy, you want to give us
questions? All right.
Are there some in the Q&A?
They are.
Actually, I can stop. Oh,
no,
we have one more. Yeah.
It's the question is, will this class be recorded and will we recite PP for reference?
I think they're asking for receiving the PowerPoint. I can send, we typically don't put the PowerPoints out, but I can send a PDF to Mark if Mark wants to send that. Are you able to send that out to people, Mark?
Yeah, we can send
the
it out.
PDF?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is recorded, and we post them usually about 2 or 3 days after today. So all the prior recording or all the prior workshops are recorded and available, and this one will be too.
Okay. And I'm looking to see, are there other questions that I've missed?
Yeah, I can read one. I can see one here.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Can someone point me in the direction for transition services for a dyslexic child? The 3Ds, we struggled getting the transition accomplished the last 10 years. So the 3Ds, that's a particular assessment, it looks like. I don't know if you have access to that or have used it in the past.
No, I don't.
Mhm.
I don't have any particular. Has she or have they looked at anything in the is it the International Dyslexia Association might have some resources on that. Our local Ohio, what is our, I have to think of there's so many resources in Ohio. I got to think about which one. But I don't know. Have you looked at they might have more specific.
Yeah, I'm looking just a superficial search here. I don't see it popping up there, but if we can find it,
I'm wondering, Mark, and I don't
we
know
can
if this
share
is
it.
what the individual is referring to. The 3Ds might mean dyslexia, dyscalculia, and dysgraphia. Not what she meant, but the 3Ds. That was my thought initially.
Oh yeah, I took that as the name of the assessment. I could be wrong, but
I could be wrong too, but that's just what I
so
on it.
And I think they're probably looking for specific resources, transition resources towards that. And like I said, I would really start there with your dyslexia specific organizations. They might. But then there's Pacer, who has a lot on transition, who might have specific resources for dyslexia. So you could look there as well.
And I'll take a little bit of a look right after the workshop and see if we can find something. And if so, I'll just send it out to the group along with the PowerPoint.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to go ahead and finish with the resources, Tammy?
Yeah. So we're talking about resources. That's probably a good place to start. So we have, and I think we've also put these resources in our handouts as well. And so there is a transition toolkit, the parent information center writing the transition plan in the IEP, transition toolkit. What else do I need to know? We have the self-advocacy definition on Wikipedia, if you want to know the specific definition of self-advocacy. And then different things that we've resourced or referenced, I should say, during the training today is in the Ohio operating standards. And we talked about ADA with colleges, and then technical assistance guide for transition to IEP. I skipped that one. So those are some of the resources that we have. And then also you could always feel free to reach out to the Ohio Coalition. This is our main number. So if you call this number, it's our intake referral line. They'll connect you to wherever you are in Ohio with an information specialist. So if we don't know it or we don't have the resource, and you see we have our partners with us, DRO and AWs. I'm not going to attempt the A yet in Weicker. So you can always reach out to one of us and we're going to find you the resource. So is there any more questions?
No, that's all. But we're so appreciative of your time today. Thank you.
Yeah,
Oh, we
thank
went
you,
1 minute
Tammy
over.
and Amy. And yeah, thank you very much. That was informative, very helpful. Lots of good resources too. And anyone can reach out to if you have questions.
Mhm.
My email address is on the same page that you register. So any follow-up questions, if you have them, we try to like to cut it off at right around 1 o'clock because we jump right into the individual guidance sessions. But thanks again, Tammy and Amy. It was great to see you both again, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks for
Third
having us.
month.
Go Browns.
Yeah, that's right. Go Browns tonight. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you a
Bye.
month from now.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.